Aloha and welcome to another episode of This is Paradise Podcast, Season 3, Episode 3. I hope you guys like this episode because I've been wanting to film this episode for a minute and I've been so busy I haven't had the time, to be honest. So it's actually 2 in the morning and I'm making this video, okay? But I'm pretty wired off energy drinks. So this is going to be my top 10 favorite podcasts from 2025, allegedly from YouTube Recap. I don't know if any of you saw a YouTube Recap or how much you guys use YouTube, where you even have a YouTube Recap. I didn't really know this existed. I don't know when this YouTube Recap thing started, but I went ahead and did it, and it showed me my top podcasts. Now, I don't 100% agree with this list, but I'm going to go ahead and go over it and kind of tell you why I like these podcasts. And yes, I'd love to get more suggestions on other podcasts that I should listen to. And they're not in any real particular order, at least the last 5. I know the first 5 are allegedly like the ones I listen to the most, which I actually found surprising. So let's go down the list first. So the number 1 podcast that I've listened to within the past year is the Dr. John Deloney podcast. I actually found this really surprising because I didn't really feel like I watched a lot of his episodes, but I guess there was a span of like a month or 2 span where I was watching so many different episodes, so I guess it's accurate. But why I love it, his particular podcast, if you haven't watched it, go check it out, is that he doesn't really sugarcoat emotional health. A lot of people call and talk to him about mostly relationship stuff, and he's a psychologist, so he gives people lots of relationship advice, and I like it. He does it in a grounded, practical way. It has me thinking a lot about like communication and emotional ownership and not outsourcing your worth to someone else. I like how he makes people accountable. There's a lot of people that call in like cheating stories, things like that, and he kind of tells them like, dude, like, what are you doing? So that one I like. It's the type of thing too where if you like a little bit of drama, you might like it because there's a lot of people calling in with like some crazy stories. So that, I don't know, that one's a fun one. I like it. I like the whole advice aspect of it as well. All right, top 2 podcast is the Financial Audit podcast with Caleb Hammer. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this podcast. If you are, check it out. Now, what attracted to me, obviously, to his podcast at the beginning were his very outrageous thumbnails and kind of like vulgar titles, which I guess he's kind of known for now. And with Financial Audit, this particular podcast, he basically talks to people that have really bad financial habits. And I mean, we've all been there where we've maybe spent too much on like Uber Eats or something, but it's really interesting because these are, he finds a lot of the extreme stories. So I find it really interesting, really fascinating. Sometimes like I'm kind of like over listening to some of like the same story, but he has gotten, I guess, better at finding various people from like either all over the world or like different scenarios or like couples, different couple scenarios, things like that. So every once in a while I'll come across another one that's like super interesting again. So I was obviously stuck on that one as well. Really interesting to hear his perspectives about building businesses, paying off debt, chasing financial freedom, stuff like that, and how ultimately income doesn't fix behavior, discipline does. So I like that podcast, and it's very interesting. It makes me feel not so bad when I've seen how much these other people are in like $600,000 worth of Pokemon debt or something like that. It's crazy. But I like that one. So watch that one if you haven't already. Check it out. My top 3 podcasts that I've watched in 2025 is The Diary of a CEO. A lot of you might know this one because it's super popular. And the host is Stephen Bartlett. He dives into mindset, trauma, performance, health, business, basically everything. He asks all kinds of questions. He asks a lot of professionals, doctors, business owners, things like that. The main things I take away from the show is vulnerability and ambition can coexist. high performers still deal with lots of different insecurities. I think that's kind of what drives that podcast for me. Discipline beating motivation, things I'm very obviously interested in, elevated conversations. And yeah, like some of his interviews with like ex FBI agents or ex CIA, stuff like that. Like I think that's kind of what got me into that podcast in the beginning. And then he has, a bunch of other people and different topics, diet, exercise, professionals, things like that too. So I just like it. It's kind of around the realm of where I see my podcast kind of being in some way, just because it's so varied in terms of topic. But that one I really like. So that was my number 3. I don't know if this is the correct order, but apparently number 4 is Impulsive. I think, and most of you know that the Impulsive podcast is hosted by none other than Logan Paul. I think in the very beginning, I started watching his podcast more out of curiosity because he was not really a content creator that I followed or watched any of his stuff. I knew of him, but I never really like participated in the watching of his content up until he had a podcast. And I'm going to be honest, and not to sound like super messed up in saying this, but I thought, well, if he can have a podcast, maybe I can have a podcast, because I didn't know what Logan Paul would possibly talk about that we would want to listen about. But again, it's different. It's a different forum. He's not making silly videos. Now he's talking about other interesting things. It is chaotic at times, his podcast, with guests, celebrities walking off and a little bit of drama and stuff like that. But it is interesting to watch. So from internet wild child to businessman, athlete, and entertainer, I think there's something valuable about watching somebody grow like that publicly. And the more I've watched it, I've definitely become a fan. Mostly in the podcast realm, not so much his other content, the WWE for sure, but that's kind of where I am with that. I'm not so stoked about him as like a human and person individual, but I don't know him personally. But I just also watch a lot of videos about how he's like scammed a lot of his fans, and I'm like not into that kind of stuff. So aside from that, watching his podcast and just watching it as a podcast and, seeing whatever celebrity life stuff is going on, it's the top 4, I guess. Interesting. But then my top 5 podcast is the George Janko Show. Love George Janko. Super huge fan of George Janko. So it's kind of surprising that it's interesting that they're both kind of close, 4 and 5. I definitely think George Janko's more up there. I actually think I've watched more George Janko 2 videos than the Diary of the CEO. So I don't really know like how YouTube recap. I don't really know how accurate that is. Honestly, even when I looked at like artists that I listened to, it didn't really seem as accurate. So I don't know. But George Janko, I really love because he leans into faith, growth, vulnerability, deep conversation. He talks a lot about God, religion, things like that. He always kind of brings that in as like a common theme of his podcast. So I do like that. But he does also like kind of interview people. He recently had Logan and Jake Paul's mom on, and I thought that was a really interesting one. So I'm actually halfway through that one. But I really love George Janko, so huge fan of him, and I'm glad that one made the list at least. All right, number 6 podcast, the one and only Candace Owens. Now, of course, Candace is very, very like conservative. I don't really align 100% with like super, super conservative values. But what I find interesting about her as somebody and a podcaster is that she'll like kind of obsess over a story kind of the same way that I do. So I just do find it interesting that she'll like find a topic or a story and talk about how she like researched it and things like that. She's very articulate. She's bold. She's unafraid to challenge narratives. I know some people think she's also very in the realm of like super conspiracy theorists, and I can see that in some ways. But she also does have like, on the other hand, she does have some videos that are really, really good and well researched on certain topics, and just kind of asking the right questions, I think, and questioning things. Questioning the government, questioning what we're being told, questioning that sort of stuff. So she's someone who values open discussion and I respect people who can defend their stance clearly. So I think that's kind of why I like her. But again, there's a lot of videos that I'm like, I don't know about that. But and the same for the next podcast. So the next one is the Joe Rogan Experience. A lot of people love Joe Rogan, probably too because he's a guy, I think, and he was probably like one of the very original podcasters. So Joe Rogan, in a lot of ways, kind of paved the way for a lot of other podcasters. So he has long form conversations. There's not really any time limits. He has a wide range of guests as well. And they kind of like ramble about certain things. Sometimes it's not so like specific what they're talking about. They talk about anything from MMA to science, politics, culture, very conversationalist, very in depth there. So if you've watched Joe Rogan, I'm sure you've seen a podcast or two that you found super interesting, whether he talked about aliens or the government or the Epstein list or whatever. Him and Candace Owens are like very top. I like to kind of maybe find a video each of them talked about the same topic and kind of see like what they talk about. I like how he's very open-minded. I think I align a little more with him on certain things because I feel like he just has like, he's like a no bullshit, like very common sense type guy. So him, I really like. And he's not so, he's very unconventional with his reactions too. Like he'll just like, tell someone F you or whatever. I like him. I definitely like him. Number 8, On Purpose with Jay Shetty. You guys know who Jay Shetty is. Hopefully you do. I don't know if you guys know too much about him. Jay Shetty spent a good deal of his life as a monk. If you don't know, as a monk, you can't talk. So I find that very interesting. Coming out of that, now he has a podcast. Super interesting. I've read a couple of his books. He's all about growth, mindfulness, relationships, purpose, which is very important. He blends spirituality and practicality well. He has a more calmer energy. I especially liked his interview with Kim Kardashian. So if you haven't seen that one, you should watch that. I think that one's really cool. It brings a lot of good motherly energy. I don't know. It was a good interview. I think you see a different side of Kim. Jay Shetty's a very genuine person. You can tell he's also very in the moment. What's it called? Yeah, very in the moment, genuine person. I like him a lot. Would love to meet him someday, but that's definitely a top podcast. I actually don't know why that one's not higher, but I think this is all just based on 2025. Probably if I looked at like the podcast I watched in 2024, probably Jay Shetty's would be more at the top. A couple other ones are the Mind Pump podcast. And this one's pretty interesting because I think it's more like geared towards men, but it's very like body fat, workout type stuff, strength training, rebuilding consistency and discipline, all stuff I'm super interested in. If you guys haven't noticed, if you follow me on Instagram or on here when I talk to a lot of people in terms of fitness, but that one's very interesting. That's my number 9 podcast. And then number 10, Modern Wisdom, which is ironic because I feel like I watched not even a full episode. But again, it's very geared towards men, I feel like. Masculinity, culture, performance, philosophy. The host, Chris, he asks intelligent, thoughtful questions, introspective without being soft, analytical without being robotic. It's super good. But again, I don't know how this even made my top 10 list because there is one podcast I have to mention that's not even on this list, surprisingly enough. And I know I've watched a ton of their stuff. And, there's even more I can think of, and, even aside from this list because I watch a bunch of shit. But it is the Iced Coffee Hour. And you guys might know this one. And the reason I like this one is I think the age of the guys, I think they're more closer to my age, but I think they're actually younger than me, maybe. Maybe they're in like their early 30s or late 20s, but I do like the Iced Coffee Hour. They also have these very, I think, a little bit more millennial themes too with some of the topics, so I like it. I don't know if you guys have watched those. But yes, please, if you guys get an opportunity to let me know some of your favorite podcasts, please comment and let me know because I'd love to tap into more podcasts that I haven't. Also, before I end this podcast, I would really like you guys to stop what you're doing right now and check and just double check that you are liked and subscribed to this channel. And if you get the opportunity to put your notifications on, please turn those on. So when I do come out with another video, you'll be able to see it right away. Usually on my Instagram, if you follow me there, Lucy in the Gym with Weights, you will see some of my latest episodes pop up. I usually put the link. And yeah, I would greatly appreciate it because every subscriber matters, every comment matters, every share. And I appreciate all of your guys' support so far because that's how I was able to get monetized in the beginning of this year. So when I look at my 2025 recap of podcasts, I don't just see entertainment. I see the themes I've been focused on: accountability, growth, discipline, faith, finance, emotional maturity. The content you consume shapes you. So if you want to be better in 2026, audit what you're feeding your mind. Look at the podcasts, look at what you're reading. And I will make more videos really, really soon. I got a lot of really interesting guests coming up soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and like and subscribe. Thank you for watching Lucy's Paradise Podcast. Aloha, that's my list.